We're going to bring this meeting of the Lawndale City Council and the Lawndale Public Finance Authority to order. I'm going to ask the city clerk to give us the roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Osborne.
Here.
Councilmember Suarez.
Here.
Councilmember Kearney.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Mayor Pullen-Miles.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councilmember Pat Kern to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and is Reverend Eddie Vargas. Okay, his main deputy is going to be here from the Life of Restoration Church. Is going to lead us in a word of inspiration. Please join us.
Please stand. Place your hand over your heart and repeat along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing.
Good evening. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 says, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap, if we do not give up." Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for our leaders. Lord, you know that leading anything could be a daunting task. Father, I just pray for energy over our leaders. I pray for their focus. I pray for our city as a whole, that we all stay together in doing good. Father, be with us today and always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for filling in. We appreciate you. Okay. Let's hear from our lieutenant, Lieutenant Leo. Thank you, sir. Public safety report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I am here tonight to present the Public Safety Report for August 19th through September 2nd. On August 24th, early in the morning, Deputy Justin Green responded to the Chevron gas station located on Inglewood Avenue regarding a vandalism call where a female suspect entered the business, got enraged, grabbed a scanner, and broke the glass counter. The suspect fled the location, but returned 5 minutes later, ransacked the business, and fled again. Deputy Green put out a broadcast for the suspect, and another Lawndale unit detained the suspect a short distance away. The suspect was positively identified by the clerk and was arrested for vandalism, transported to and booked at South Los Angeles Station. On August 26 at 11:30 p.m., Deputy Justin Green and Deputy Dean Mendoza responded to a Chevron gas station at Hawthorne Boulevard and Rosecrans Avenue regarding a male who was scaring customers. Deputy Green contacted the male who displayed symptoms of being under the influence of a narcotic and was yelling profanities at both the deputies and the customers. The suspect refused lawful commands from Deputies Green and Mendoza to drop 2 metal window squeegees, but suddenly the suspect charged at the deputies. Deputy Mendoza sprayed the suspect with his OC spray, which had no effect. The suspect still fought with the deputies. The deputies requested additional units to respond and were able to handcuff the suspect. Deputies searched the suspect and recovered methamphetamine from the suspect's person. The suspect was arrested for a battery on a peace officer under the influence of a controlled substance and possession of a controlled substance, and was transported to and booked at South Los Angeles Station. On August 31st, 1:45 a.m., Deputy Jesse Ojeda was conducting a patrol check at the Brooklyn bar. He observed a parked vehicle with its alarm going off, lights flashing, horn honking, with a male inside rummaging through the vehicle's interior. The male saw the deputy and began to walk away while holding a black bag. Deputy Ojeda followed the male pending a possible burglary investigation, but then lost sight of him. He later found the suspect back at the parked vehicle. The male then ran away from Deputy Ojeda while holding a handgun. Deputy Ojeda requested assistance on his portable radio and ran after the suspect. Deputy Ojeda, along with assisting units, were able to detain the suspect a short distance away. The deputies were not able to find the black bag or the handgun. The vehicle belonged to the suspect, who was a convicted felon. Due to Deputy Ojeda observing the suspect with a weapon, he was placed under arrest for felon in possession of a firearm, transported to and booked at South Los Angeles Station. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant, for that report. Are there any questions of the Lieutenant concerning the report?
I have none. No questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, now we are at item letter D, which is oral communications. So when you have the opportunity to speak to this body, being either the Lawndale City Council or the Lawndale Public Financing Authority, on items that are not on the agenda. If you'd like to speak to either of these bodies, we ask that you line up by the flag. When it becomes your turn, if you just come to the podium, if you would start with your name, we would appreciate that. In about 2 minutes, the amber light will come on and give you the signal to start wrapping things up. Are there any takers? Okay, seeing none, we will close public oral communications, and we'll bypass public comments, and we're now at the consent calendar, which is item number 1 through 11 of both the Lawndale City Council as well as the Public Finance Authority. What is the pleasure of this body concerning the consent calendar?
If there's no additions or subtractions, I'll make a motion to accept the consent calendar as written.
I'll second it.
Okay, seeing that there's no addition or subtraction, the motion's been made that we accept the consent calendar by Kearney and second by Reed. Is there any discussion on the motion? Would the council please vote?
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to read the
Yes,
title
ma'am.
first?
Please read that title for me. Thank you.
Item 2 is ordinance number 1163-19, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lawndale, California, amending the Lawndale Municipal Code, Chapter 3.12, updating the process of claims and demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 12 under administrations, presentation and discussion for a proposed desalination plant. I'm sorry, let's vote. I'm sorry. I was moving pretty fast. Moving pretty fast. See, that's why we pay you the big bucks. Thank you. Okay, would council please vote on the consent calendar?
Motion approved unanimously.
All right, thank you, Madam City Clerk. Now we're at item number 12 under administration. This is a presentation and a discussion regarding proposed desalination plant that's being evaluated by the West Basin Municipal Water District. Let's have the opening staff report. Who wants to give a staff report?
I can,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. I don't have the names of the individuals who are speaking. I think the city clerk may have those, but
I have them.
you have them. Very good. This is a presentation by West Basin Municipal Water District and also individuals who are not supporting the desalination plant that's being proposed by West Basin. This came up at the last council meeting. There was direction for us to bring this back for discussion to the city council. So we have two groups here. They have 5 minutes each to present their presentations, after which you may ask any questions you wish. And then if you have any further direction to staff, you can provide that, or you may want to continue the matter. It's up to the council direction at the end.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. There was the organization, LA Waterkeepers actually attended a meeting and brought this to our attention, and we have subsequently put it on the agenda. So since they brought it to our attention, I'm going to ask Bruce Resnick. Is Bruce to give your presentation? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Bruce Resnick. I'm the Executive Director of Los Angeles Waterkeeper, an environmental watchdog group, and part of the Smarter Water LA Coalition, which is advocating for ocean desal only as an option of last resort after other better alternatives are pursued. Because I have about a 10-minute presentation to squeeze into 5 minutes, I'm going to start with my closing, which is simply ocean desalination as being proposed by West Basin is the most expensive, the most energy intensive, and thus climate impacting, the most environmentally harmful option to enhance our local water supplies. Moreover, it isn't needed because there are better options that aren't only theoretical, they are literally happening on the ground, largely as a result of advocacy from groups like ours. And as one of the 17 cities that buys water from West Basin, either directly or indirectly, you have an important say in where your water supplies come from. So this is just a little bit about West Basin. I won't go through it just for time, but again, you're on the map of the 17 and represented by Don Deere. West Basin is, they serve through these 17 cities over 800,000 people. So they're actually one of the largest water agencies in the state. Where they're proposing this desalination plant, ocean desalination, is in the southern part of El Segundo. It would be a 20 million gallon a day plant. It is, they issued a draft environmental impact report in March of 2018. We're waiting for the final EIR. It's been a year and a half. We're hearing it's going to be by the end of the year, at which point they're going to be deciding whether to move forward with the project. To date, they've spent about 18 years and about $63 million in studies on this project, which unfortunately we don't think is money well spent. By the way, I'm looking, where is the timer? Or there not? I just have to guess. Sorry. So why don't we like ocean desal? First, as I mentioned, it is the most energy-intensive option. This is a study by Pacific Institute, the leading think tank. If you see out here, ocean desal, seawater desal, it is the only thing that takes more energy than importing water from Northern California and pumping it over the Tehachapi. So it's actually going to increase our carbon footprint. Our experts said this plant, the energy or the electricity needed to run it using Edison's normal supply would contribute about 44,000 metric tons of carbon in the atmosphere. That's more than 18,000 homes, or almost as much as adding 2 Lawndales to the grid, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, especially when we all know and we're feeling very real time the impacts of climate change as the 4th Category 5 hurricane in 4 years is hitting the East Coast as we speak. Well, along with energy comes cost, because energy is a big driver on how we create our water. Ocean desal is also by far the most expensive option to enhance our local water supplies, more than many of the other options that are available. And this is very in line with like the Carlsbad desalination project is $2,100 to $2,300 an acre feet. And these plants tend to kind of go up in cost over time, which is something we worry is going to happen with this facility. Next, ocean impacts. Oops. I don't know why. There should be words on there, but so the other impact, of course, is on the ocean. And so you've got brine discharge. So when you're pulling in 40 million gallons a day to discharge, to reuse 20, for desal, you dump out 20 with brine that's concentrated twice as much. It also often has chemicals, anti-fouling chemicals, sometimes heavy metal from corroded equipment. We're still studying. We don't actually know the impacts, the full impacts of that discharge. Plus, you also have impingement and entrainment, so you either suck in wildlife against the screens or small larval life through the screens. Cumulatively, these kinds of intakes have tremendous impacts. That's why we've actually phased out once through cooling power plants. Now ocean desal is coming in the place of those. And again, when you think of all the other stressors on the ocean, from climate change, ocean acidification, overfishing, pollution, this is just one more burden that the ocean can't take. So here's actually, because I'm a big wonk, one of my favorite slides that is a little hard to understand, but because cities in West Basin's territory have done such a great job conserving water, we don't actually need this plant anymore. So this is West Basin from their own documents where they projected water to go. Light blue is conservation. So they projected water to go, all of a sudden go up in 15. This is actual water use. We're staying steady. So that amount that's lower than what they've projected is exactly the amount of desal. So congratulations, because you 17 cities have done well, we actually don't need to invest $500 million in a facility anymore. So now some of these other options that are out there, and again, when we started advocating against this project a couple years ago, these were all theoretical. Now they're happening. Reduce, I've already talked about. We've done a great job with conservation throughout the state. Reuse stormwater. For those of you who follow Measure W, we're going to be investing $300 million a year in stormwater capture. The environmental community was very supportive of that. Recycle. Mayor Garcetti's announced the plan to go 100% recycled water. West Basin has been a longtime leader and partner with the city on recycled water, but they've been passed. They've been passed from other agencies in Orange County and in San Diego. We want to see them redouble and retriple their commitment. Restoring our groundwater. We know that we have a lot of contaminated groundwater, including, this is the West Coast Basin where West Basin actually gets some of its water supply. This pink is brackish water, so it's where salt water is intruded. You can actually do desal there, but it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot more cost effective because it's not nearly as salty, and there's a project there moving forward with the Water Replenishment District. And all of these are things the environmental community has supported. And so what do all these alternatives have in common? I didn't mention also the Joint Water Pollution Control Plan is also looking at doing 150 million gallons a day of recycling. Well, they're all available to West Basin. These are all water supplies that West Basin can tap into. They're all more cost effective, more environmentally friendly, and less energy intensive, and none of them were analyzed in their EIR. So the next thing I want to just mention with the EIR that was really a problem was it failed to meaningfully consider impacts on frontline communities. For an EIR that was over 1,000 pages plus appendices and studies that were referenced, there was 4 pages of environmental justice analysis, but 3.5 of them were just restating what the law was. There was half a page of analysis, and all that they looked at in their EJ analysis, their environmental justice analysis, was the census tracts where physical infrastructure we built, which is Hawthorne for a pumping station in El Segundo, whether those census tracts were any more disadvantaged than the other census tracts in those communities, regardless of how impacted the entirety of those communities are. We're saying if you are going to be building the most expensive option, you are going to be building the most energy intensive, which is going to have climate impacts and air quality impacts, we know it is disadvantaged communities. It's frontline communities that bear the brunt of that. None of that was analyzed. And frankly, when you have most of the communities that are more impacted, that have done a good job of conservation, essentially, by building a plant like this, we're subsidizing the communities like Malibu and PV that have still water usage through the roof. And so we're paying hundreds of millions of dollars for communities that are already doing a great job with water quality. So it's because of all of this that there are literally dozens of groups, environmental justice, tribal, community organizations, social justice organizations, green businesses that have stood up and said, we do not want this project. They've all submitted comment letters to West Basin. A lot of agencies have also expressed their concern. And so some of these cities, there are 6 cities so far that have expressed concern, 6 of the 17. Our goal, I don't think it's a secret, I think Patrick knows what my goal is. We want to get at least half the cities that buy water from West Basin to say, we don't need this project, we have better alternatives going. And so we're on our way towards that. Coastal Commission and water boards, they can't take a formal position because they have decision making, but they wrote some pretty strong comment letters on some of their concerns in the DEIR. Again, this is who we are, our coalition, my contact information with the Smarter Water Coalition. I knew that I had a lot to cover, so I also printed materials for you all, which has a little bit more detail. I'm obviously always available to answer questions. And one of the things in those materials is the Smarter Water LA Coalition is organizing a town hall this Thursday in Manhattan Beach. And at 7:30, we'd love anybody who's interested. That we're going to have an hour of programs and an hour of Q&A, so a lot more than what I can cover in 5 minutes. But it seems like I made my 5 minutes. At least I didn't have any lights flashing at me. So thank you very much, and I'm around to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Before you sit down, is there any questions at this point before we move ahead, so we won't lose your train of thought? Okay, we might have a question or two for you. Okay, please stand by. And from the West Basin Water District, Municipal Water District, Patrick Shields.
Good evening, Mayor Pullen-Miles and City Council members. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak this evening and for the opportunity to weigh on this particular discussion. My name is Patrick Shields. I'm the General Manager of West Basin. We, as Bruce just pointed out, he did some of my presentation for me. We represent 17 cities and almost 1 million people. We also are a large provider of recycled water, one of the most successful recycled water programs in the entire Southern California. I would like to just read you what our mission statement is. And our mission statement, which I think is very relevant to our discussion this evening, our mission statement is to provide safe and reliable drinking water, high-quality drinking water, safe and reliable, high-quality drinking water to the communities we serve. And that's not just for now, but for future generations. That's the charge of West Basin and its elected board. That's what we're responsible for. And today, to cover in this 5 minutes, I want to just go over kind of 4 areas related to this topic. Number one, why did we even evaluate and look into ocean desal? What caused us to do that? That's number one. Number two, how we went about doing that. The measured steps over multiple years that we've taken. Nothing is rushed here, and it's completely transparent. 3, the environmental review process itself. How does it work? Where are we at, and what are the next steps? So those are the 4 categories I want to talk about. So how did we get it? Why do we even look at ocean desal as a potential option for our water supply portfolio? Right now, over 50% of our water is imported. You've heard the term imported. I assume you all know what that means. We rely on sources from as far away as 600 miles from Northern California, after it makes its way through the Bay Delta and down into Southern California. That's the State Water Project. From the Colorado River, all the way up in the Colorado River Basin, shared by 6 states and the Republic of Mexico, we have a certain portion of that water, and that's already over allocated. The state water, the Los Angeles Aqueduct from Mono Lake is the other artery that brings water in here to the South Bay. That represents, like I said, over 50%. So we had to develop an alternative, take a look at developing an alternative to the water supply portfolio. And one that's, funnily enough, environmentally viable and environmentally responsible and economically viable. That's what we did at the very, very outset. The problem with, and the challenge to imported water, and you probably heard a lot of this in the news, climate change, and Bruce is correct, it's a game changer. When we started looking into this 18 years ago, climate change was happening, but that has actually exacerbated some of the conditions that are impacting the very fragile supply of imported water as we speak. We're in an earthquake zone. The San Andreas Fault, those 3 arteries that I talked about, it intersects all 3 of them. Okay, and if you listen to Lucy Jones or anybody out there, I don't want to be alarmist, but that presents a major, major risk. If that supply is interrupted, and by Metropolitan and others' own evaluations, could be up to 2 years without water. So we wanted to look at a local supply that could bolster our portfolio in terms of water reliability. Of course, we have multiple years of drought, and everything in terms of weather events is now, you mentioned the hurricane, is exacerbated. We have some of the hottest days in July, in this past July, in the history of this state. So there are a lot of factors that have come into play where the whole reliability of the imported water is not what it once was. But before we even looked at ocean desal, we developed and spent almost $1 billion developing water recycling. The headquarters is right down the street here at the Ed C. Little plant. We have processed over 200 billion gallons through 2018, 200 billion gallons. So when in terms of real environmental stewardship, that's 200 billion gallons of partially treated sewage that's not going into Santa Monica Bay, 200 billion gallons of imported water. We didn't have to import it. It freed up that water. And it's 200 billion gallons of recycled water that can go to other sources that would have been using potable water supplies. So we've walked the talk on that. And that's water we get from Hyperion. And Eric Garcetti, a good friend, yes, he wants to get to 0 discharge from Hyperion by 2035. That's a little ways out, and that's I totally support him in that goal. But we're the ones that have been recycling the water from his very plant for this past 25 years and have realized these successes with the 200 billion gallons. And we remain committed, Bruce, to expanding the recycled water program. We're doing that and we'll continue to invest in it all the time, as long as we have customers for the water. How did we go about it? Number 2, how did we go about doing this evaluation? First thing I would say, there was no rush, or nobody just woke up and said, let's build an ocean desal plant. This started way back in 2002. We did a pilot plant from 2002 to 2009 to characterize the local ocean water characteristics and look at some of the technologies. That's a pilot plant is a very small plant, right? You can get a certain amount of data from that. In 2010, we built a big demonstration plant over here in Redondo Beach, which was open to the public, environmental groups, the regulators, and this was to conduct scientific research to engage the public and to see what environmental issues there were and to mitigate them. We actually spent the money and the time from 2010 to 2014. What are the results of that? Well, they speak very much to some of Bruce's concerns here. Protecting the marine environment. 2 things of concern when you do ocean desal. One is the impact on marine life coming into the system. What we use now and what's been proposed at our plant is very, 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 very small screens, smallest in the world, and 1 millimeter. and they screen out at a velocity of 0.5 feet. In other words, they're going very slowly through these screens. So there's none of the impacts that in previous generations of intakes that are even being considered for this possible project. The second part, and I did hear you discuss this, I think, at your last meeting, was the brine discharge. That's a big issue. What happens with the salt that you take out and you put it back in? That's a very, very good question. First of all, there's no net introduction of new salt. If you take out 10 pounds, 10 pounds is going back. You're not adding any new salt. But the concern is valid because in old systems, what they did is reintroduce the salt or the brine, the concentrated brine, right? Because it's and you put it out in a slug. When you put it out in a slug like that, there are problems. That technology is no longer used or certainly not considered in this project. Our demonstration plant and what is being considered for this plant showed that if you had a system of diffusers, and these are used all around the world, Australia, Israel, Middle East, proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. You don't have to go to Israel or go down to Carlsbad. And by the way, I have information about Carlsbad as it is planned, as it works today. A plant heavily opposed by Bruce and said all the same kind of things, but it's up and running. No fish are dying. There's no harm to the marine environment. There's no violations. And the taxpayers and the people who paid for it and the policymakers that were behind that love it. And if you don't believe me, call them. Call Carlsbad. Call anybody in San Diego County Water Authority. You don't need to talk to West Basin or you can talk to Bruce and him doing this. But seriously, on the brine discharge, the water returns to ambient conditions, what it was before, within 45 feet, and 2 parts per trillion of what the concentration was. All of that happens in a matter of seconds. It's through the use of diffusers and the way it's reintroduced. So that's a very serious issue, completely mitigated and addressed in any proposed project by West Basin. Okay, let me move on to the environmental review process itself. So again, we're going pretty slowly. We've gone from 2002, 2009, that's the pilot, 2010 to 2014, that's the demonstration. And by the way, the demonstration, I've got to tell you this, the demonstration, the science from that, and we had the Scripps Institute, we had all the top engineers and academia involved, that the very results of that has informed the ocean plan. The ocean plan is California's regulation that governs this. It's the most stringent in the world. If we were to build a plant, we would have helped inform that most stringent permitting requirement to protect the environment. That's what it's all about, and it's very, very good. So real quickly, on the environmental review process, we started the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report, under the strictest requirements of California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. You come across it here at the city. And we released that, we started in 2015, and we released a draft EIR last year in 2018. Again, I know Bruce is worried about why aren't we getting back to him quicker, because we're not rushing anything. We're using the utmost due diligence in reviewing that. We were required to put that on the street for 30 days. We were asked for extensions from the public, from the environment. We extended to 45 days. We extended to 91 days. Every time we were asked to give an extension, more time. And we had town hall meetings. We had different venues, all in the interest of transparency. We received over 200 comment letters, and we were required to do 4 special studies. That's just over a year ago. So it does take a little bit of time. All 4 studies are now just about complete. The final environmental report is very, very close to being released. And the actual next steps, that final report, when it comes out, we will convene a meeting of our board to consider that final environmental impact report for certification at a large venue to give people, as many who wants to come, and I certainly encourage this group and anybody in the Lawndale community to come to that event. Our board will take that up for consideration. So, all in all, I just say to you that this has been no rush. This has been painstakingly well, and I'm a big environmentalist myself. I have 10 rain barrels. It doesn't make me an environmentalist, but I'm very, very concerned about the environment. Really concerned about the marine environment. I wouldn't stand behind anything unless there's essentially no impact to the environment. And just for the other, we're not in the business of guessing what might be the next big thing or something in 2035, or flange, the sewage that you flushed on your toilet this morning, going directly into your drinking water supply. We're not saying that this probably something could be in the future. We're talking about a local supply that's permitted currently and doing it in a responsible way. So thank you for your time, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. So I'm going to open up to the diocese for any comments or questions of both of our presenters in no particular order. If anyone has anything that jumps out immediately, if not, I'll start with a couple of questions unless someone has something they want to jump out immediately. Yes,
I
sir.
do. You mentioned, you said you mentioned about the San Andreas Fault.
Yeah,
Well,
but she's
if
gonna
this
respond
plant
when him
was
come to
up,
the-
no, I don't need them up there.
Okay.
If this plant was up and running and the earthquake ran down the San Andreas Fault, that plant would fall in the ocean. So all those chemicals, all the metal would fall in the ocean. My cabin would be oceanfront property. You say that, let's say you take out 25,000 gallons of water, you put back, let's say, 10 pounds of salt. You say it balances out. It doesn't. You're minusing 25,000 gallons of water out of the ocean, but you're putting in more salt than water. I just have a problem with this, and I know my Native Americans, brothers and sisters, have problems with this. So, you know how I feel up here, so I'm just going to pass it on.
Okay, are there any other questions? No. Yes. I'll ask a couple of questions. While you guys are getting your thoughts together, let's see. Just a quick question. I'm going to ask, gentlemen might want to sit in the front seat in case we have a question for you. Why don't I start with Patrick real quick? I'm sorry. Yeah, Patrick, yes. I have one question for you. So you mentioned about the water recycling, and it seemed like we're reaching our goals in terms of water recycling. And I know you also mentioned your statement of having a reliable water source. I'm just curious as to if we are doing so well on our water recycling, why not continue with that progress as opposed to going down the road of desalinization?
Yeah, very good question, and it often gets asked. Well, first of all, we are continuing down the road. Like I said, we're continuing to expand our recycled water program for acceptable uses. You have to consider that you have to have something to recycle in the first place. Most of our water is coming from a long ways away, which is why the fault issue is very, very important here. But what you need to do recycling first, which is what we do. Desal was not the first thing we considered. You need to conserve water, which we do. We've probably got one of the most aggressive conservation programs and biggest $1 billion invest in recycled water. Continue to do that until you run out of those types of uses. But recycling water can never totally replace, not even close, even with some of these new projects, totally replace the total demands for drinking water at this stage. And we're really living on borrowed time. That's the way I look at it. It's kind of we're rolling the dice on our water supply reliability and on a very limited portfolio with a heavy weight relying on imported water.
Okay, great. Also, can you tell me something about your environmental justice analysis, how this will impact disadvantaged, not just the front, coastal cities, but disadvantaged communities?
Environmental justice is one of the very criteria that's required by CEQA. You have to look at it, you have to respond to it. We got many comments and questions on that. They'll be in the final report, which is yet to be released. But those are questions, many questions about that and carbon footprint. Those are all contained in the final report, and they are addressed. They're required by CEQA. It's not you can't, if you don't answer the question, then your report could be deemed infeasible. So they'll be contained in the final report.
Okay, so we won't be able to respond to that until after the
right, that's
the
what I'm
report
saying.
is out.
Yeah,
Right.
that would be the time to look at that.
So what do you think would be notwithstanding the final report, what would be the goal, or at least the objective of the board, the West Basin Water District concerning the environmental justice?
Well, if you look at our board, and Bruce had some pictures up there, we have a very diverse board representing very diverse communities. And my good friend Gloria Gray, who's the chair of Metropolitan, and actually all of the board members are very environmentally conscious, but very aware of social justice and the environmental justice issues. They bring it up. They'll be our toughest critics, Mayor Miles. They'll be our toughest critics. If that's not properly addressed, this project could likely not move forward. That's how strong they are in that position, that issue.
Okay, and I have one more question for you. Since at least I'm not a scientist, and so, I spend a lot of time reading a lot of public policy on papers or what have you in this position in my other regular job. And so we tend to rely a lot on professionals, so to speak, if you will, particularly some of the organizations that are engaged in this type of environmental policies on a day-to-day basis, so they may have more of a handle on the science of it. Which organizations, environmental groups or organizations is currently in support of this project?
I would say Bruce has put up an impressive list of people opposed to it that he's marshaled. But I would go back to the science behind this. We engaged Scripps Institute, SQUIRP, various universities, the top scientists, top engineers to look at this to ensure it's environmentally safe. I'm not, I know Bruce is here to represent the site, and as an environmentalist myself, I kind of understand it. I just don't agree at all with how his representation of what we're doing is. It's probably the most environmentally sound, and probably in the long run, when you look at reliability of supply, financially sound answer to the water supply, lack of water supply reliability that we currently have.
So you don't have like a list of...
Well, I listed hundreds of different people who have supported us and give us support letters. I can get that back to you. He's obviously got a bigger list of environmental groups that are opposed to it.
Well, for me, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, I do take a lot of stock in those because these are people who, when you talk about the science of it, they work in the science of it, every day, as opposed to a layperson such as myself. I can understand the policy implications, but whether or not the science, is a sound is something that's beyond my day-to-day activity, and so I do rely on looking at those organizations and seeing what their views and their opinions are on it. And I understand the environmental impact report the final impact report haven't come out, but surely they have, developed at least an initial thoughts or analysis on whether or not they would support. They mean environmental organizations.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and maybe I didn't do the best job of answering it. I would direct you to the Carlsbad plant, which has been up and running for over 3 years. I have a flyer here. Again, I encourage you to talk to them. They were litigated by Bruce's group, who lost on all accounts, and were supported, by the Sierra Club, all of the usual people who should be doing but they lost on all those counts, and really all of the things that they said it was going to do environmentally never happened. It's been running for 3 years, and they can't find any negative environmental impacts, intake or discharge. So that's the science, that's the proof of the science behind the current technology. Older technologies, Mayor Miles, 20, 30 years ago, 50% more energy intensive and not really doing a good job of protecting the environment. That's not allowed anymore. It's certainly not allowed on the ocean plan.
Okay,
Hope that answers your question.
I appreciate that, Patrick. Is there any questions?
I have a question. Are we using, compared to Carlsbad, are we using even newer technology to address some of the concerns that the environmentalist groups had when they were objecting that plant being built?
I would say yes. We're a slightly newer plant. A lot of what we've done in our own research has now gotten into the ocean plan. There'll be no new permits written under that. I can get you a better answer, but we try to do better than anything in the world. There's going to be, I can guarantee you this, there won't be, not in Australia, Israel, Middle East, South Africa, there won't be a more environmentally protective project in this if it were to go through. And we're responsible for that. That's why I want to take great pride. We're not going to be asked to comply with a permit that somebody else made up. We actually helped form the most stringent permit. That's a big important thing to me when it's brought into question that we didn't do a thorough enough analysis and it's not going to be environmentally friendly. We're actually at the forefront of making sure that those regulations are very tough.
All right, and then just a quick follow-up. Catalina Conservancy, I don't know if they've weighed in on this. I'm not seeing them here in the documents in front of us. I know we have active plants on Catalina. I've not seen any impacts or any actual marine reports of the discharge in that area. I know they're using diffusers as well. Do you know if any of that information is available somewhere in regards to this? Will it be part of the EIR?
With the Catalina plant, I'm quite familiar with. It's a sort of a standby plant. It only runs in severe drought, and it's oddly enough that's run by Southern California Edison. It's the only plant that they run. I'm not aware of any negative impacts, but it's been running on and off for many years. Nor do I aware of any from Santa Barbara or Carlsbad for that matter. But I can come back to you with that information to see what's out there, Councilman Reed. But I've never heard anything negative, and I've had worked over there in Catalina for many years, in the 90s, and I know that plant was running, but not continually, but never any issues with compliance that I'm aware of. But I will check into that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions?
I have a comment.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Just for me personally, I kind of thought I was going to get a packet with some of the info included on it before I came to the meeting, just so I could read through. I did look online, try to find things, but I thought that I was going to get a little more. I feel like it's a little early on for me to make a decisive decision on this, on whether or not it could be a good thing or a bad thing. Because one of the things in the back of my mind too is, what happens, if we don't have the water anymore? What is it going to come down to, if we are without that? And that's a big issue or a big concern for me. Furthermore, I mean, some cities haven't even, El Segundo themselves haven't even made a decision, and it's being built in their backyard. So I kind of would like to see the final EIR before I go forward and making any decision on this.
Yes, sir.
I think she hit the nail on the head, because that's correct. I think this is premature to take a position.
Well, it sounds like, go
No, well, I believe the city notified both representatives here, and DSAL brought their package, but West Basin didn't bring nothing.
That's true.
He's shooting from the hips, and, if he's going to,
That doesn't change the point that Bernadette made, though.
well, I understand Bernadette, yeah, I understand the question, but we can sit on it. You know how I feel.
yeah, and I also made, thank you for those comments. I also made the same point in my notations here about waiting for the final environmental impact report to be issued, because there are some items in there, such as the environmental justice items, that we can't really fairly speak to without knowing exactly what they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was hoping that we could kind of flush some of it out so we can kind of get a preview of what might be in there. But I understand that once the final impact report comes out, then we could speak to those issues. They probably will raise even more questions, at least for me. But at this point, I don't think I have enough on either side. Like I said, I would like to see some of the organizations. Obviously, we did a great job listing organizations that are opposed to it. But there's always organizations that are, you would think there's always some organizations that are in favor of it, and see what their analysis are on both sides, so I can kind of get a better idea after the environmental impact report has been issued. But those are just my thoughts, and I made a notation of that as well. Although I do appreciate LA Water Keepers for bringing this to our attention, but I think we might need a little more.
So do you want to stay neutral till we get more information?
We can definitely stay neutral until we get more information, and after the environmental impact report comes out, and we get a presentation of exactly what's in there, we can have the city kind of staff to look at it and to review it, to kind of help us formulate, our opinions of it once it's
That'd be prudent.
Once staff. Okay,
That's a more prudent path.
yeah. Let me get another speaker in here. Let me get Bruce up for a second here.
I just want to speak one thing to the process and why we're sort of urgently coming out. Just so you know, when the final EIR comes out, the agency, West Basin, the lead agency in this case, can vote to certify. They have to wait at least 10 days. Now, I don't know, and I actually haven't asked Patrick, so I don't mean to put him on the spot, if they are going to do 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. as an environmentalist, I can never assume. So, and I'm not asking you to change. It sounds like you need more information. I would encourage you all to come out Thursday. There's a flyer. I'm happy to speak to anybody. But theoretically, when the final comes out, they can be voting 10 days later to certify. So there isn't necessarily a lot of time or even potentially a council meeting between that. I just wanted you to be aware of that.
We don't know the date, right?
No, we don't. Just to clarify one thing, our admin code actually requires 15 days. And like we've shown in the past, whatever the constituents or whether the policymakers have asked, we've considered strongly. This is not like the draft, but you'll need time to look at it. And I apologize, Mr. Kearney, for not having more material. I was asked to give a 5-minute speech with or without a PowerPoint. I'd be glad to come back with more of that, especially when the final EIR is out, and give a full report and take all your questions at that point. It's kind of, that's what it's for, that particular period. I'd be very happy to do that.
And I know you mentioned that you usually your policies for 15 days after the report, the final report is out. I would imagine because of the magnitude of this type of project, often residents or special interest groups usually contact elected officials and ask them to ask the lead agency to allow for more time. And we see that in Bayona, the wetland or some project or what have you. And that's something you guys would be open to if the public say we need more than 15 days.
We did, and we demonstrated that during the draft. We were required to do it for 30 days. It ended up being 91 days, 2 different extensions and several meetings and town halls. I don't want this thing if it's not transparent, and the chips will fall where they may. I want it to be open, and I want honest discussion and dialogue with the full EIR in hand.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, so at this time, we don't really have to take a motion. We just simply wait till the environmental impact report comes out. You'll keep us informed on any events that we might want to attend to further educate ourselves, and then we'll invite you guys back out when we're ready to make a position. I'll take a position on it. Is that okay?
Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, with that, we'll move our agenda to item number 13, a discussion about the city's residential property inspection report. I do have at least two speakers wanting to speak on this item. Let's have the first opening report first, and then we'll have the.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, council
the
members. This also is a result of direction at the last council meeting to have a discussion of this matter, which is the city's residential property report program. A little background, this began back in 2001 when the city council took several actions back then to look at unpermitted construction, which was resulting in the loss of on-site parking on residential properties. Following 2001, there were actions in 2002 and 2007 that resulted and led up to the creation of Chapter 8.80, which is the residential property report program for the city. Briefly, this program provides for the city to review dwelling properties, to furnish a residential property report which identifies observed violations of the city's codes, rules, and ordinances. The intent is to reduce existing code violations on residential properties and to prevent future violations, to make all parties aware of issues that are contained on the property. Also, Chapter 8.0 provides that the city identify observable items that fail to comply with the city's codes, rules, and ordinances. In the past, once one item is observed and the staff is on the property, there are other things that are also observed. So it does lead to other code violations that are identified and presented to the prospective buyers. Attached to your report, there are a number of examples. There are staff reports. Chapter 8.80 is attached. But tonight, the discussion is for the City Council to review these matters and see if you'd like to give further direction to the city staff if you want to amend or modify the current residential property inspection program.
Okay, thank you for that report. Okay, who would like to start the discussion on this item?
Well, I'll start it. I don't know if we want the speakers to speak beforehand in regards to their piece, though. What do you think?
Well, let's have a little discussion
Yep.
so they'll be able to reply to it.
So, I mean, a number of different things have taken place in the state that's changed some of the reasons. I understand we put this together trying to deal with our illegal garage conversions, et cetera, additional parking spaces, et cetera, things that we no longer support. We're not allowing parking pads. So typically, if they're not permitted, they're not there. Additionally, the accessory dwelling units is removing our control to add parking. There's been talk of garage conversions being allowed again in LA County, and that's coming down the pipe. So with those things all in line, the question is, do we want to continue putting the city immediately in between this, or allow this to be within the residential, within the real estate groups, the buyers and the sellers? I wouldn't never buy a house that I haven't had an inspection on and know what's going on. So at that point, a buyer would say, I want an inspection that would provide that, and go from there. So right now, we have ourselves mandatorily in the process. We're not real estate. We get a lot of complaints in regards to some of these, and we actually depower the buyer. They can't do their own fixes within a year of buying the property, which means now they've got to have construction and consultants and everything else put in that process, which is causing a lot of grief across the community. So the question is, do we want to continue to put ourselves in here automatically, or just allow that to go into the folks that are dealing with that real estate transaction?
Okay. Anyone else, anything they want to add before we have speakers? All right, are there any I know I had two persons that would like to speak on these items, mainly the Londons, Pam London and Abram. Yes, please.
Pam London, 171st. Well, I'll start with, I still want the rental property inspection program, but obviously I can't get it, and this is the closest thing I have. So when these inspections are done, I know, had there not been an inspection, y'all wouldn't have given 12 inches to that lovely couple, because they got 12 inches because of this inspection program. When I had my house inspected, because even though it was a brand new build, I still had my homeowner inspection. Does not cover any of your permit processes. Otherwise, it would have caught a whole lot of crap that was allowed and shouldn't have been. But we won't even get into that because it's all legal because it was signed off by the city of Lawndale. When you buy a property, yes, you should do your due diligence and go down to City Hall, or now that they're putting a lot of this information online, you should do your due diligence and see what is and isn't permitted. Around 2000, I was looking at homes in the city of Long Beach. Long Beach was very, very against all of these illegal conversions, illegal add-ons, and they were out there hot and heavy, and any house that you went to look at, let me tell you, those listing agents, they were telling you, this is going to have to be removed. You're going to have to tear this down. This is not permitted. You need to go and speak to the city. There's a code case on this. There's a code case on that. And you know what? That's a good thing. And it also gives a buyer negotiation power to negotiate that price down, because now if that seller chooses to go through with their sale, then they're going to be selling it with a code case, with a violation, and so that buyer now, hopefully it was caught and is now informed and can now go back to the table and renegotiate their deal. Or they can get out of it, whatever. But the idea that y'all would scrap this, and parking pads are ugly. And yes, we are giving parking pads if they fall in the code standard. Just not everyone can have one, because not everyone can qualify because of the way the code is written. But there's a lot of weeds to your knees. Maybe that can be addressed during these times too. And every time there's a home for sale, the city should be looking at the listing, because right now I think there's 22, so big looked, real difficult to look at. But the city should also look at properties surrounding
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
The code enforcement website states to maintain the safety, quality of life, and property values of all who live, work, and play in the city of Lawndale. Code enforcement officers work with property owners, residents, business owners, and visitors to ensure the proper maintenance of private property within the city. And this specific municipal code on the residential property report states the intent of this chapter is that the requirement of such a report will reduce existing municipal code violations on residential properties and prevent future violations. This process is one of the few times that the city's reactive approach does not require a neighbor to snitch on another neighbor. It is a fair process that allows the city to correct code violations. In my 6-unit HOA complex, there were 2 units that had illegal deck conversions. The correction of these violations was initiated as a result of the residential property report, one in 2017 and the other property late last year. The first one was corrected late last year, and the second one will be corrected in the next couple of months. Since the code violation for the second one was determined during the escrow process, and the buyer was able to obtain some financial consideration to correct the violation, which requires more extensive work than the first one, both of these did not delay the escrow process. The planning department successfully worked on both of these projects, collecting plan review fees and then almost $2,000 in permits. The city's enforcement of these violations also allowed the HOA to have these units restored to the original construction. I'm sure there are buyers and sellers who might not be happy with the process, but then anyone given a parking ticket on street sweeping day or issued any code violation is probably not going to send a thank you letter. The residential property report is one of the few times that code enforcement has a proactive approach to enforcing code violations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, we can speak now?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, you tapped your light. I think you want to speak.
Yes, I did. So I actually really do agree with what Dan said. I think it causes some undue burden on some of these buyers and sellers. A good alternative, I think, because I know some people do want to do their due diligence and look into it, I think we should make it optional so that a buyer or seller can decide whether or not they want to go through with the inspection or not.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just a small footnote to that, realize Lawndale leads in a few different things. We're leading in this. We're one of the very few cities that do this in the South Bay. And really it is incumbent upon real estate. I feel that an optional package makes more sense. It does not detract from our code cases. We see something we need taken care of. It deals with it. That's not part of this residential report. So it is a trigger on some cases. But again, I think the optional phase for those in a real estate transaction are the ones that should be controlled.
So we have in the staff report a list of cities in our area in South Bay, including Long Beach, that whether or not they require such a report. And I think I counted there's 7 that requires an inspection report, and 2 of these cities that do not. And the ones that do not would be Torrance and Hawthorne. The rest of the cities, Carson. I'm sorry, the one that do not would be El Segundo in Torrance. No, Hawthorne does not as well. Okay. But Hermosa Beach, Inglewood, Long Beach, yes. Manhattan Beach, yes. Redondo Beach, yes. Carson, yes. And Gardena, yes. So I guess the question would be, without some type of report, how do you capture and compel the correction of code violations? Now, mind you, we're not talking about, like I mentioned to the one person, we're not talking about whether someone put in windows or what have you without the proper, authority and documentation. We're talking about things that impact specifically either the health and safety or parking. But how do you get an opportunity to make sure that those are correct when, if you are the buyer, let's say you don't have enough parking, and you, for whatever reason, you are the buyer, you can determine, okay, I'll live with that, right? And you may or may not get the property. I'll correct the defect. That's would be something that the property owner would have to decide to do, or decide to negotiate with the owner. Maybe, like someone mentioned, one of the speakers mentioned, you could be in a situation where you negotiate a price based on, yeah, I'm going to have to do some corrections or what have you, and then decide later on, I can live with that for another year, I can live with that for another 10 years or what have you. And so we would miss that opportunity if it was affecting like parking, to bring that back to a position to where it's no longer having an adverse effect on parking. That's my only thing with it. I just don't see where's the other opportunity. I get the idea that you're in the middle of like escrow or what have you, and some would argue that this prolongs the escrow period or what have you, and that we're not in real estate. And I understand that. I get that. We're not in the business of real estate, but we are in the business of making sure that we preserve, the highest quality of standard of living that we can in the city, and truly, the property, whether or not they're in conformance with our municipal code, is one of those things that we are charged with. That's the welfare portion of our duties, our obligations. There might be an answer to that, but I just don't know how else do you, and maybe staff know, how else do you get that opportunity? It's the same idea. You get in a car accident and someone, they pay you for the car accident or what have you because they was at fault, but you decide, you know what, I can live with that damage, and you just go to Vegas, with the money or what have you. But that's your choice once you receive payment for your damages or what have you. So even though it is a negotiating tool, to me it does not necessarily will compel a buyer to then fix those defects.
True.
Not like the city knowing that there's a violation and it continues to be a violation every day.
Right. Violation cases come up and they get addressed. And a blight issue comes up and it gets addressed. Someone pulls a permit and something's seen and it gets addressed. Really it's incumbent in my mind of those involved in the transaction. I would never buy a house even 2 years old without an inspection report. But that's me. I know several realtors and they encourage their buyers to get inspection reports. So it's part of that industry. We're slightly redundant here. We don't get a lot of support in some of the court cases that we've got going on that keep going on and on and on and on and on because they're lower priority. And that's part of my thought on that process as well.
And in terms of health and safety issues, most buyers are encouraged to do a home inspection report in which you have a professional that will go and assess the property and look and see things that are, obviously not up to code or health and safety code.
To be clear on that point, the inspectors usually look for like the state codes, not the city codes. So they might not know that, for example, we don't allow the garage conversions and the different local laws that we have.
Carbon monoxide.
Right. Right.
But
Can't hear you, Jan. You're too far from the mic.
You're talking about.
Oh, I just backed up what she said.
no, well, these inspectors, they're not fluent in every city's codes, but I think the point I was making was that they will at least look for the health and safety issues, which I think are the most important things when you're looking for a home. And then different cities have different codes. For some people it might not be an issue than for others.
No, I'm just.
Any more comments? No? I'd make a motion
I don't
that
have
we.
any.
I have one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
We're just talking about the garage, the accessory buildings outside, not the home inside, correct?
Well, that brings up a little contradiction in one of the languages here.
Because the 7-year mention, they say just the garages, the accessory buildings.
On the beginning, let me see if I can find it. At the beginning, it talks about, here it is, that the intent is to identify municipal code violations that are observable from the public right-of-way on page 13. And then I guess this is the next page, the back of the page, although it's numbered 2. It said the inspections shall be limited to the exterior areas of the residential units and the interior areas of the garage and/or accessory buildings. So clearly, on this portion, it's inside the garage and accessory building.
Correct, but not the house itself.
Not the house itself, although here on page 13, it just says observable from the public right-of-way, which is kind of contradictory.
Yeah.
But it is just the garage and accessory buildings.
Robert, you asking if that's something the staff?
That's correct, that's what the code says. You can ask to go inside the main house, but they can say no. The code doesn't require that they allow us in there.
You said it does allow?
It allows us to ask to go in, but they can refuse that.
Okay, so when it says the inspection shall be limited to the exterior area of the residential unit and the interior areas of the garage, it really is saying that staff is authorized to seek the authority to inspect the interior area of the garage or accessory building.
The garage, separate from the house itself, right?
Yeah.
That answered Pat's question?
You good?
So Dan, you had
Sure.
That's pretty much all.
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much was my concern, so.
Yeah. I would put forward and put forward a motion actually to change this to an optional to the real estate folks involved.
Okay.
I'll second it.
So the motion is that we basically do away with the inspection report, right?
Make it optional.
Make it optional,
Make it optional.
not mandatory.
Doing away with the mandatory.
I second.
And it will be second, okay? Everybody understand it? Is that the motion? Okay, council, please vote on the motion.
Who made the second? Robert, you?
Yeah.
Oh, Jim?
Jim was gonna make the
To
second.
make it optional.
To make it optional.
Okay.
You good?
Yours is
Did I hit it? Want it again?
motion approved with Mayor Pullen-Miles voting no.
That means it failed.
Yeah.
At least you didn't follow.
Almost there, folks. Okay, item number 14, reports from council members. Let's start with.
All right. Now, I got called out of town for the last one, so I didn't get a chance to attend a meeting. I have no meetings to report this time around.
Okay.
Did want to just throw a shout out to the families from the conception. I don't know if everyone's up to speed on the news, but our dive community, our marine biology community, and our local, we have a teacher who lost a family member on that accident yesterday. You know, it's a horrific accident. A lot of folks in the boating industry are going to be thinking really hard, you know, and we should think ourselves when we get on the boats, as I will next week.
Yes, and our prayers will be with the family. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I have nothing, but just to remind the folks that our festival is coming up next week from Saturday,
Oh, yeah,
11 o'clock, Jane Addams. 14th, yes.
14. All right. I'm thinking something else on 24.
I attended the South Bay City's Board of Directors meeting last week, and nothing really to report. I'll pass it along.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, you can go ahead because there was no meeting.
Right.
No
Yes,
meetings
sir.
between last meeting and this one.
Okay, I have a few meetings. For Labor Day, I attended the ILWU Labor Day Rally. I also attended the South Bay Chambers of Commerce Regional Mixer in Redondo Beach. And I also attended the Gardena Jazz Festival, which was, I hope it was a good one. And I also attended the Water Replenishing District's Albert Robles Education Center, Conservation and Educational Center, the grand opening of that, as well as the Sanitation District, our regular meeting. And those are all the meetings I have attended since the last time we met. We do have one closed session, which we will confer with our legal counsel. I'm going to ask the city attorney to give us the provision of the closed door session.
The city council will meet in closed session on one item to determine whether to initiate litigation in one matter as agendized as item I-15. Thank you.
Thank you. Return from closed session. I'm going to ask the city attorney to give the report.
The City Council met in closed session on one item pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. The council unanimously authorized the initiation of litigation against the owner of property at 4738 West 153rd Street. Thank you.
You good? Okay, third place. Okay, with that, it's time to adjourn. The next regular scheduled meeting of the City Council will be held at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, September 16th. And the, yes.
Not yet. I'm going to be reviewing CMT tomorrow, the agenda. When we met last week, the agenda had, I think, just a couple of items, and I've asked the staff directors to look at those. If there's not a need, I will get word to the mayor, and then we can look at canceling the meeting if appropriate. But it's very likely.
I'll make a preemptive
So don't go out of
motion.
town, as they say.
Yeah, it's very likely, based on the last agenda review, that there's nothing pressing that we can move it to October 6th, I think.
I'll make a preemptive motion.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned to September 16th, unless otherwise noticed. All right, we are adjourned.